Welcome to Manager Tools, the Effective Manager book promotion. Here we go. Hi, everyone. This is Mike Ozan and Mark Horstman. And Mark just released, after a lot of work, the Effective Manager book. And this cast is unlike most of our casts in that there's not a lot of actionable stuff in here, but we thought it'd be useful to many of you out there to hear more about the book, learn why Mark wrote the book, why it took so long. Many of you have been waiting a long time. Who's the book for and what's in the book? So, hi, Mark. Thanks for agreeing to walk through this. I think folks will find it very, very interesting.
Yeah, and we don't do this very often.
No, we don't.
Once every 11 years, we're going to release a book and we'll put out a cast that is not specifically actionable. I think that's a pretty good track record.
I think so. I hope people find this to be interesting and useful. So let's get into it. So The Effective Manager is the name of the book. Why did you title it The Effective Manager, by the way? It's not one of the questions I said I was going to ask you.
Oh, that's right. Curveball already. So first of all, it's not about management. So you notice management is not in the title. We focus on manager. And the reason for that is because, as I say in the book, management is, if you go to the Wall Street Journal as an example and go to their management page, it talks about big organizational stuff like strategy and finance and operations and cost controls and succession planning, which are really all organizational processes and systems. But our focus is on the individual manager. We're not trying to teach management, because when you say that, you mean all those other things in most contexts. We're trying to help individual managers be effective. We've said many, many times in many, many places, when clients hire us, we're not specifically focused on helping the client be more effective. We're focused on helping the individual manager be more effective. And if all of the individual managers in the firm are more effective, the firm will be more effective. Assume the firm's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So we use the word manager rather than management because we want to focus on the individual. And as most of our listeners know, we focus on actionable behavior. We don't teach the high level stuff. We actually teach this is what you do and this is how you do it. And so in that sense, we're focusing on individual behaviors because organizations don't behave other than in the sense that you aggregate everyone's behaviors, and that is the organization's behaviors.
And to be clear and more specific, we, in the podcast, we talk about and share with folks how to be effective, how the individual manager can be effective within the organization. But the vast amount of our time is focused on how the manager can be effective with his or her directs, right? That's the fundamental piece about management is how well do you manage your directs?
If there are 8 directs of mine, me spending time trying to get better is not nearly as valuable for the organization as me helping my 8 directs get better, because there's 8 of them and there's only 1 of me.
That's what the leverage is.
Yeah. And the vast majority of people, of course, have had nothing but average or poor bosses, and they don't know what a great boss is like. So much so that management is a joke now. It's a cynical approach, so much so there's a comic strip, Dilbert, about pointy-haired bosses and how stupid organizations can be. But it doesn't have to be that way. You work for an effective manager, and it's a revelation. I will mention this. The reason we use effective is because an awful lot of guidance you can get that is actionable about organizational life, whether you're in a 5-person organization or a 500,000-person organization, tends to focus on efficiency. Things you can do, often nowadays called hacks, but things you can do to be better at the things you're already doing. But the problem with that is efficiency is not what your organization wants from you unless you're doing the right things. What your organization wants is effectiveness, and effectiveness is doing the right things. And then, of course, efficiency is doing them right. And the effective manager is one who is doing what needs to be done based on what the organization expects of them. And it's critically important. I can promise you every CEO, when he or she looks down 5 or 6 levels in an organization, thinks, when he asks, how good is that young manager down there? They're going to ask 2 questions. Did he or did he not achieve the results that his boss asked from him? And did he retain his people? And the vast majority of managers in the world, I would say, outside of our audience, 90% of managers in the world cannot define what it takes to be a good manager. And it really is effectiveness, which we go on and define in more detail in the book. So that's why we titled it that. It's a very short title. And one more thing. It's because no matter how good I get, no matter how great Manager Tools is, no matter how many weeks we are at number one at Amazon or anywhere else, this book will never be as good as the greatest management book ever written, The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. And that's why on the Amazon webpage, you'll see our books bundled together quite frequently.
And I know you get a thrill every time.
Yeah. So
that.
The idea that I'm mentioned in the same breath with Peter Drucker, which I should not be, is a thrill. And I'm happy to end my career right now, having said that.
Yeah, I shouldn't mention this, but if I asked Mark, like, what's the first book you should go read on management, he wouldn't say The Effective Manager. He'd say The Effective Executive,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. If you can master chapter 2 of Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive, you are playing a different, better game than 99% of the professionals around you, and you will win.
Yeah. So go read The Effective Executive, and then quickly read The Effective Manager afterwards.
Flip through that Effective Manager book. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the title. I find it very interesting, and particularly homage to Peter Drucker, who we both believe is just a genius. So thanks for explaining why you titled it the way you did. So what motivated you to write the book? Because there's a lot of work in writing a book. This is not an easy endeavor.
Yeah. Oh, it's way harder than you can possibly
And everything
imagine.
we know about book publishing, it's not to become rich. That's for sure.
No, yeah, it's definitely not. Well, I think most people will be surprised about this. Maybe not our listeners. We wrote the book to extend our message to a different medium being the singular of media, plural. The vast majority of people don't listen to podcasts, or certainly didn't 10 years ago. Or put differently, the market for book reading in management is enormous compared to podcasting. Now people say, wait, Mark, podcasting, you're recording this in 2016. Podcasting is having a renaissance and so on. Yes, you're right. But a great deal of the podcast listening is in entertainment. It's in what we like to say is timely information as opposed to timeless information. There's all kinds of pop culture. There's all kinds of current events and news and stories and so on. But one of our principles at Manager Tools is we do not put out guidance that is timely. We don't address current trends, other than perhaps mentioning technology that may be enabling to a manager. We address things that will still make a difference 20, 25 years from now, and yet still make it actionable. So the purpose of the book is simply to extend our teaching to people who read books but don't listen to podcasts, or even if they do listen to podcasts, don't think of a podcast as a place to get management guidance. And to tell you the truth, I don't have any problem when people roll their eyes. When I'm talking to two clients and one of them, one manager or executive at the client, is a fan, a listener, and he's brought me in to do something for the firm. And then he says to his colleague, oh, yeah, so Mark's here because he has a podcast. Well, you're not going to pay somebody $20,000 a day because they have a podcast. The point is that podcasting, to a lot of people who don't listen to podcasts, certainly they don't think of it being a delivery device for management, but it's not the same thing as saying, I'm from McKinsey. And if I'm going to put my career in your hands in terms of following your guidance and put myself at risk relative to my boss, I want to trust you. So typically for the vast majority of managers, for many, many years, there were only two ways that a manager could get development. One is the company sponsored some training. Before the internet, I know that's funny to hear, guys, before the internet, the only way you could know what training existed was someone in your organization would notify everyone of what was going on in the local area in order to get training on how to manage people. You couldn't get it on your own. You really couldn't. You couldn't go anywhere to find out. So if you worked in an organization that didn't train its managers, didn't have a budget for that, and there are plenty like that, the only way you could get development was to read books. Now with podcasting exists, but it's still a sliver of the market. So the Effective Manager book is designed to reach people who want to improve as managers, but don't listen to podcasts or don't listen to podcasts about management And books are a much bigger market, and we care about managers. And the mission of our company is every manager effective, meaning every manager in the world. Some of those people aren't going to listen to
Until
podcasts.
every manager is listening to podcasts, I guess books are important.
Exactly. It sounds very fancy to say it's a media play, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question, I hesitate to ask you because it seems kind of unfair. So after reading your book and just having a great experience, then I think, oh, you've been promising this book for years. You've been working for this book for years. And so it's unfair to get something such a great book and then ask you, yeah, it's great, but like, why did it take you so long? You've been promising it so long. But we have a lot of listeners who've been looking forward to the book for a long time. And so I feel like you don't owe anything, but I'm curious, like, why did it take so long?
So the book's lengthy gestation period will easily, at the end of my career, go down as one of my great regrets. We had good reasons for it. You and I talked about it on a regular basis. However, you and I, when we started this company, agreed that we would make it a profit-seeking company, even though we didn't have to. We could have chosen to not work. And in doing so, we said, okay, we'll make it a profit-seeking company in order to have rigor associated with the process that we know our process of making every manager effective has to extend well past our lifetimes. In fact, you and I have talked about the 500-year plan many times because it's going to take that long, and management is not going to change that much in the next couple of 100 years in order to make every manager in the world effective. We want every manager in the world to know the basics of effective management and practice them the same way every person in almost virtually any country in the world where there's any sort of public schooling knows that 2 + 2 = 4. And the reason why is because it's not that much harder. Being an effective manager is not that much harder than memorizing your addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division tables. Okay. With that in mind, I was afraid. The book was finished in 2006. Actually. So it's been 10 years. Now it's been through numerous revisions as I've changed various subtle parts of it and tried to make it more useful as I've learned how to be a better writer after writing an essay a week, a term paper a week, as my wife likes to say, for all the podcasts. But essentially, when I wrote it, we could have done nothing to support it. And one of the primary ways that consulting and training firms get business is managers and executives at large organizations read books and say, wow, I love this. In fact, we had Maggie, our sales associate, already had our first call this week. The hardback's been out 5 days, and we've already had a call from somebody saying, I want you to come in and train my managers on how to do this, which we would not have gotten before because he would not have learned about us because he wasn't listening to podcasts. So if we had put this out 10 years ago, when you and I just started the firm, I would have been on the road every single day. And that's not a sustainable model.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
In short term.
Yeah. Short term. Yeah, it does until
you fall over.
Until the milk cow dies. Yes. So we waited, and we wanted to have an organization that had significant capacity, available capacity to support the kind of growth we believed was possible if the book was successful. Well, at the same time, trying to manage a company, a small consulting and training firm that had to be profitable. So there was a delicate balance between staffing up too quickly, which often means lowering your hiring quality. We weren't going to do that. On the other hand, we needed to have business already in place to justify the staff, then to allow them to have capacity to address future needs. So it was an economic decision on our part that perhaps you could argue if we'd have delivered the book 5 years ago, we'd have had 5 more years of people having a chance to read the book. And I won't argue with that. But we are not going to be a firm that tells other firms and managers how to do things and then admit that we don't do them ourselves. We believe in sustainable growth, in sustainable employee development. We have no desire for managers who yell and scream and get the most out of people for 90 days only to make that person go home miserable every day. And so you want to find a right balance between fully engaged and working very hard and feeling some stress about not achieving what you need to achieve, while at the same time having time for your family and for your society and so on. It was a fairly delicate balance, and you and I finally reached it last year, which is when we started negotiating with Wiley, our publisher. Long answer. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. I think there's a lot of people out there who who absolutely wanted to hear the answer to that. So you talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious, who is the book for? I mean, is it for managers in small companies and large companies, for-profit companies, non-profit companies? Because, I mean, everybody knows it's a pretty readily accepted fact that, if I'm in a nonprofit, it's different. And, I need a different set of management skills in a nonprofit than a for-profit. Or if I'm a small company, it's way, way different than a large company. So is this about large companies for profit, or where in that matrix does this thing fit?
What's that line? Yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, not really. Oh, yeah, we're different at a nonprofit. Oh, that really won't work at our firm. You don't understand. Our firm is different.
Right.
Mark, you don't understand. We have an email culture at our firm, so we really couldn't do this.
Yeah, you say all that stuff as if you had heard it before.
Yeah, a billion times to the point I just want to throw up a little bit in my mouth. So the book is for managers. If you manage someone else, if someone else thinks of you as their boss, if in your mid or larger size company and there's administration built up around the organizational structure, if you have to write an annual review, a performance review on somebody, you're a boss. Okay. If someone comes in and asks your permission for things, you're a boss. If you think of yourself as having a team, not necessarily being part of a team, but if you have a team that reports to you, maybe even several teams if you're in a matrix organization, God help you. If that's you, then this book is for you. It is for managers, and it's also for aspiring managers, because you and I have said many, many times before, part of the reason we got what I've been teaching for years into the podcast was because we didn't like the idea of young people starting their careers and having to learn stuff the hard way. And by the hard way, we mean doing it wrong repeatedly and then inadvertently stumbling into the right way. And, you and I both had successful careers, and we still mess stuff up terribly. We've talked before. Imagine what our careers would have been like, first in the Army and then at Mobile, at MCI for you, and at Procter & Gamble for me and elsewhere. Imagine what it would have been like if we'd have known this when we were 22. So it's not just for managers. It's for those people who say, I'm going to either start a firm on my own, which is great. Entrepreneurialism is great. And therefore, if I grow, I'm going to have people. And of course, big companies fail because of a lack of innovation. Small companies fail because they don't grasp the importance of management. And regardless of how great the idea is, they end up falling apart because they don't have the glue that holds the organization together, which is managerial behavior. But if you're in a nonprofit, if you're in the government, if you're in academia, if you're overseas, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how old or young or what the gender is or what the background is of people who report to you. The guidance in this book works for everybody. It's universal. We invented the tools that we teach in the book, but the fundamental principles have been known to management scientists for 50 years. It's just that nobody likes talking about it because management isn't cool. It's not sexy. So the book is for managers, people who are struggling to be good, getting results, taking care of their people. It gives specific actionable ways to do those things to make you effective and go home happy.
But for managers in the U.S., right? I didn't
good
mention
point.
there.
Yeah,
So
no.
it wouldn't work for somebody in France, for example.
Folks, if you're relatively new to us and you're listening, and we do this, Mike and I do this every week. And if he ever says, well, it's a known fact that, what that means is you're about
to say something stupid, right?
Yeah, he's about to say something counterintuitive. No, this works everywhere. Management is the same everywhere. We have delivered this guidance on every continent in the world except Antarctica. And Antarctica doesn't have a budget, so we don't go. But we have listeners and we have managers, fans who are in Antarctica managing scientific teams using manager tools. It works everywhere. And it is amazing to me that number of people say, well, that won't work here because of X. Or the young person says, well, you'll have to show me your data, which, by the way, we talk about in the book. We have a good bit of data. And I say, well, if you need data in order to support changing your managerial style, I'm happy to share it with you. But how did you come upon your initial managerial style? Because you certainly didn't have any data when you started managing. So yeah, it works everywhere at every level. There are CEOs who use our work, hundreds of them. Many of them are put testimonials on the back of the book. EVPs, SVPs, VPs, general managers, presidents, COOs, all the way down to individual managers of small teams, and on every continent, every gender, every age.
Okay, you made my point. I'm beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
But these are questions we get all the time. If you're a manager, you have people working for you, this stuff works.
Yeah. We guarantee it, right? We guarantee it.
We do.
If you follow our tools, we guarantee you will improve your results and, in fact, be able to do so in less time.
Okay, so let's get into the contents. What's in the book specifically?
Okay, so what was interesting about it for me is a number of listeners to our podcasts who have said, boy, the book is great. I thought it was going to be a compendium of show notes. For those of you who don't know, if you're new listeners, every week when we put out a show, we have detailed show notes that are written before the show. So part of the reason the show feels coherent is because it's been thought about for many hours. For every
not a
hour
random discussion.
Yeah. It may sound casual, but it's not random by any means. For every hour we put into that we record, it probably takes 4 hours to write. So the book is a different medium, and so therefore I had to write it a little bit differently. But I basically wrote it talking to a manager. I pictured some of our friends, some of our clients, some of our longtime listeners, and said, what would I tell them? In fact, the inscription to the book says, this is what I tell my friends when people come to me and say, hey, you're a management guy. What should I do about X? I start the book with the definition of an effective manager. What does it mean to be effective? What do CEOs want? It's not hard. And when you read it, you'll say, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. And what's funny is nobody's talking about this stuff. Management is interesting in that you and we got tested on whether or not we could be engineers before we graduated from the academy with our engineering degrees. You can become a manager just by doing good work as a welder or as a developer or as a salesperson with not necessarily any connection between the skills you've been using to be good at this job and the skills that will be necessary to be good as a manager. And many people know that. They've had that experience. Somebody gets promoted and they have to work for somebody who should never have been promoted, even though they were good at the job they're now supervising. So I define what an effective manager is, and then walk through the logic of basically in management science, there are 4 critical behaviors that effective managers engage in much better than average managers. And in fact, the data is even more compelling. Average managers do this stuff way better than poor managers. This is reasonably widely known information in managerial science. And the 4 behaviors are: know your people, specifically get to know the individuals who work for you. You don't manage a team. Teams can't be managed. You can only manage individuals. Teams don't accomplish anything. I know that makes me unpopular in places, but the logic is irrefutable. We might give credit to a team, but it's actually the individuals on the team who do work. And so therefore we need to get to know each individual on the team. We manage everyone as an individual, not as a group, not as a race, not as a gender, not as my directs. I'm going to manage Mike different than Wendy, different than Maggie, different than Judy, because each one of them is an individual. And what most managers do is manage in a way that makes sense as if they were managing themselves, which is great if you hire people just like yourself. But most people inherit teams that don't have everyone cloned like themselves. And they wonder why, gee, it doesn't work with some of these people. I wish they made it easier to manage. So we talk about knowing your people. Second thing is communicating about performance. Great managers are very clear with their people. You did well or you didn't do well. I'm not going to be upset. I'm just going to give you some performance communications about how you're doing, good or bad. Get to know your people, communicate about performance, ask for more, and push work down. These are the 4 critical behaviors that great managers engage in. Now, at that point, the theory of the book, which only takes about 20 pages of the 200 pages, the theory of the book is done. And then we say, okay, how do you actually achieve these things? And I'm pretty sure this is the only management book that's ever been written that lays that stuff out. And then we say, okay, how do I get to know my people? How do I talk about performance? How do I ask for more? How do I push work down? And of course, as you well know, Mike, the whole point of our company, Manager Tools, is that they had been designed before, but we essentially improved the tools that will help you get to those 4 critical behaviors. We teach Manager Tools one-on-ones, which helps you get to know your directs. We teach a specific feedback model, which helps you talk about performance to help managers over their fear of talking about performance with their directs. We teach a specific coaching model that'll help you ask your directs for more. Because the first rule when a company grows is not to hire more people, but to get more out of the people that you have. And then lastly, pushing work down, we have a delegation model that helps you choose what to delegate among the work that you do and whom to delegate it to, and then what to say and how to say it. And then the rest of the book is very matter of fact. If you want to start doing one-on-ones, here's what you do. Here's what a one-on-one is. Here's what will happen during it. Here's how long it is. Here's how often to do it, 30 minutes weekly and so on. And then we say, okay, now that you understand what a one-on-one is, if you're still committed to it, this is how you actually start doing it. And we recommend you send out an email, which we link to on our website. And then you have a meeting with your team. And during the meeting, we tell you what to say in the meeting. And then we recommend you wait 3 weeks before you start your one-on-ones. And there are reasons for that. And we recommend keeping track of how often you do your one-on-ones and so on. And after we do that, after we talk about one-on-ones and talk about common questions and so on, and then we walk you through how to start doing them. And then we go to step 2, which is talking about performance. We tell you what the feedback model is and why it is the way it is. And then we say, here are some common questions and concerns. And then here's how to start delivering it. Here's how to introduce it to people. Here's how to gradually begin to become better at it by practicing and so on. And we do the same process of teaching the coaching model and then talking about how to start it. And then delegation the same way we teach the delegation model. And then we talk about how to start it. And then there's a brief afterward in which I suggest that tools are important, but really what matters in managing people is love, the willingness to risk yourself for the benefit of somebody else. And you put it all together, and that's a 200-page management book.
You're talking and reflecting on our history. And I don't know if you thought about this, but it's been 20 years since you consulted to my horse. And for those who don't know our history, Mark and I went to West Point together and served in the Army for a period of time together. But the key thing relative to manager tools was I hired Mark to consult for my organization. I told him what he needed to do, and he came in within 2 weeks. He said, no, you're wrong.
No,
this is what you need to do. You need to do the things that you're finding in the Effective Manager book. And it was such a powerful experience for both me and my organization. I mean, literally, I had managers coming into my office crying, telling me how it changed their professional life and their personal life. It's not about personal stuff, but the fact of the matter is, there were people greatly impacted by this. And I told them back 20 years ago, dude, we need to figure out how to get this in front of more people. And here we are 20 years later, doing just that.
Were it not for podcasts, it would have been only the book, and we wouldn't have 1 million listeners a month all over the world. It was you that came up with the idea that we needed to do it, and it was you that came up with the idea of podcasts. I'm just the hired help.
Yeah, you just That's exactly the way I think about you. You're just the hired help.
Exactly.
You're just a resource.
Send him out on the road to talk to some people.
So I just had these emotions, just these great emotions flowing through my body as you're talking about this stuff. So folks, I was going to say, how do I get the book? I have a copy.
Yeah, I think you can Google The Effective Manager, and it'll take you to Barnes & Noble or Amazon, or if you're in Australia or Europe or whatever, there's places where you can get the book, both Kindle versions and hard copy versions. There is a limited time, if you're listening early on in 2016, there's a limited time where you can get signed copies from us. It takes a little longer because I actually have to sign them. Yeah, the book is widely available. I think at one point yesterday we were ranked number 1 in business management for the hardcover and number 2 in business management for the Kindle version on Amazon. So we held the number 1 and number 2 spots. Both.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to add, dude, about the book before we sign off here?
I'm happy to have done it, and I hope the book helps you become more effective, because someday my kids might work for you, and I want you to be good at it.
Well, I hope you feel proud, dude, because it's an awesome book. Very proud of what you've done. So
thanks, partner.
Thanks for being my partner.
Oh, my pleasure. Same to you.
Talk to you later. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, have a great one. So long. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want the how-tos of management wherever you are, check out the free Manager Tools mobile app. It's available on both iOS and Android devices. Go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and download the Manager Tools app. Just search for Manager Tools in the respective store, or go to the Manager Tools website, www.manager-tools.com, and you'll find the links on the bottom of the homepage. Once you've installed the Manager Tools app, you'll have access to all the Manager Tools and Career Tools shows anytime, anywhere you want. With easy searching of podcasts by category, using the map of the universe, or using built-in search functions, it couldn't be easier. Additionally, if you're Manager Tools personal licensee, you'll have easy access to all the show notes right from the app whenever you want. Go to the App Store and download the Manager Tools mobile app. You'll be happy you did.